Please come to order for this November 21st meeting of the Planning Board. All rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Or if I can get out. There we go.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you, everybody. We've got Tori Hill, our Community Development Director, sitting at the table with us today. She'll help us out with any of the procedures and processes tonight. And if Ken and/or if one of those two or both don't show up, then we should maybe get a chair moved so it's a little bit more space here for all of us. But not critical. Okay, first thing on the agenda is the approval of the September 19th, 2023 workshop minutes. We have a moved by Mr. Harden, seconded by Ms. Cook. Any discussion? All in favor, please raise your hand, and I appoint Kathy as a regular member, so 5-0. Kathy's an alternate for everybody in the audience. However, when we don't have 5 regular members, the chair appoints the alternate as a voting member. So Kathy can do it all tonight. Next is the approval of the October 27th, 2023 minutes, moved by Mr. Harden, seconded by Ms. Cook. Any discussion? All in favor? 5-0. Okay, next, in a moment, we'll open the public hearings. I guess subdivisions first, okay. So we've got 2 public hearings tonight. The agenda actually has the subdivision changes. Oh no, has the changes to the land use code first. So for folks here, you've got a packet, 2 packets. And the one that says proposed amendments to the Bridgton land use code to implement the state housing law. That's the one we're going to go over first. And then the second one is changes to the subdivision regulations.
Wait, say that again? Which one? On my agenda, we have the brief overview, then we have the public hearing on subdivision.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Then land use.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
That's the way I read it. So it'll be
Okay.
subdivision, then the land use code. So subdivision first, land use code second.
Okay.
So the changes to explain these, and I guess I'll start with the subdivision since that's first on the public hearing. The subdivision regulations, the proposed changes are to make sure that the land used for development is on buildable land only, which excludes land that's not suitable for development, and we can go over that when we get there. We're clarifying that the lot size is per dwelling unit. In the past, there's been some confusion about whether that's the case. And the third one is that we propose to require a vegetative buffer for any subdivision. Currently, all the types of subdivisions except a regular old subdivision require perimeter buffers. So that's subdivision. When we get to the land use code, these are very important. These proposals are so that we can come into compliance with the Maine Affordable Housing Law. We have to implement this by July of 2024. If we don't, the state will implement it for us. That's the high level. What would really happen is when we reviewed various applications, we would be going to the state law along with the applicants and each trying to propose what that law means. So So we don't want to get in that situation. In addition, I think if we didn't have the ordinance and somebody appealed a decision of the board, I think the state can actually handle that appeal or get involved in it, which is probably another thing that town does. The town would rather go through its processes, which is the appeals board and then a judicial court. The changes cover accessory dwelling units, the allowance of accessory dwelling units. There's a big expansion by the state to allow accessory dwelling units. The other is to define and allow affordable housing developments. And then the third is to allow certain dwelling unit allowances, which maybe the brief way to describe that is, depending on the dimensions of your lot, you could build more than one dwelling unit on it. Okay? Complementary to that, but not required by the law, the board is proposing to reduce the required lot size in the rural neighborhood from 2 acres to 1 acre. And we'll get into that as well. Okay, so I'll open the public hearing for the subdivision revisions. And we don't have, I don't know if we have anybody on the Zoom.
Doesn't appear so.
Okay.
Do you have to admit anybody, or will it not do it automatically?
No, they should automatically.
Okay.
So let me just pull up the subdivision. Okay, so how many of you in here have had a chance to actually read the changes for subdivision?
I'm sorry, what did you say?
How many folks have had a chance to read the changes and have questions? I want to open it first that way in case somebody has a question about what they've read.
You can
Okay.
have mine.
All right, so what I'll do is I'll go over the changes. There's not too many of them.
That's the ones in blue, right?
Now the other thing I should just let folks know that the subdivision regulations, amendments to the subdivision regulations may be approved upon the conclusion of a public hearing and a vote by this board. So we're having the public hearing now. The board will vote after the public hearing to adopt or not these changes. That is different than the land use code. The other parts of the code require the legislative body, which is the townspeople, to vote on it. All right, so to get into the subdivision changes, if you go to page, I believe it starts on page 127 of your very, large document. Okay. So it's 127 on the piece of paper. It should be 122, 121. All right, so it's either 121 or 122, depending on.
It's in the blue.
It's in the blue, correct.
Yep.
And everybody find that?
Mhm.
Okay. So minimum lot size and lot frontage for subdivision
I'm
lots.
not there yet, hold on.
The change here is first,
118 it starts.
did you find something different?
Yeah, it starts on 118, section B.
It's on the hard copy too.
Yeah, I don't have the hard copy.
There's one over on the table.
Where are you looking on 118, Angie?
Yeah.
Oh, I think it just doesn't show up on our,
All right.
you're in section V15.
That's where I
I'll
am.
use the same thing as everybody else had.
Okay. I think that's the way it is code.
That's the only one. So, okay. So what have you got on 118, because I don't have a hard copy.
It says application submission requirements, final subdivision plan. A copies be application submission requirements.
We looking at this or this? You're looking at,
There shouldn't be a change there.
that's right, that's why I'm asking the question.
Yeah, I'm not seeing,
So, okay. I'm not seeing any changes under that.
There's no changes.
Okay. So,
I say V17 is what first.
back to 121.
yeah. I
Back to
think that's where it
121,
starts.
okay.
Sorry.
Sorry about that.
Okay. So what you'll see is under K, on page
122.
122, minimum lot size and frontage for a subdivision plan. The changes are in blue. The first thing you can see is that lot size shall be calculated to include only net buildable land. That's the first change. The second change is wherever the lot size is specified, it's per dwelling unit. Okay? Net buildable land. So I want to kind of stop and see if people have questions about this. Do you want me to explain it or just move on?
That's the land use code.
I don't have any questions.
Okay,
Is this
all right.
subdivision here, though?
So then the next change is, should be around page 127 or so.
Is net buildable land in the definition?
Yeah, it's in the,
Yeah, we're in
that's in the
definition.
definitions. We'll get there.
I don't see it.
180.
Are you looking at
Oh, there you go.
subdivision? It's
Okay.
in subdivision, not in land use code. So if you go to page 127 or 28, I think you'll see a new section in there, V buffers. Okay? So we're requiring a buffer strip of 15 feet, basically along the perimeter of the land. So the front and all around the sides. And then there's an explanation of what the buffer strip must consist of. As you can see here, if the existing vegetation is not mature trees or doesn't act as a screen, then new landscaping needs to be incorporated. Okay?
No changes to the setback.
No changes to the setbacks. So, as a point of information, based on what Mr. Turog just brought up, in the subdivision regs, there's two-dimensional standards of the land use code that do not apply to
I
subdivision.
don't see it there, that's why I'm asking the question.
One is, and that's the way it's been, it doesn't have to stay that way, but for now, this is the way it is. One is lot size. So the lot size is defined by what's in the subdivision, not by the district. And the other is frontage. Okay, so the minimum frontage is 100 feet, bottom line, regardless of the district. Okay?
Yeah, we have a question about the issue.
Yep.
We have them go to the mic.
Can you go to the mic, please, and name? So, because
At the
otherwise
podium.
the podium, sorry. Otherwise, folks can't hear you. Hi.
No. How did you come up with 15 feet?
Well, that's a good question. So, we have multiple types of subdivisions. Some are condo subdivisions, which usually are a cluster of large buildings. Some are condos, cluster subdivisions, and then planned unit development subdivisions, okay? And usually those are multiple buildings, and they take up a large space. And so that is always in the subdivision regs, those have always required a 25-foot perimeter buffer. What we've found recently is that there are some subdivisions, instead of having an interior road that goes up and then the houses are on the road, the subdivision comes directly off a public road and only has driveways. And so those types of subdivisions currently do not require a buffer, perimeter buffer. It's our belief that when the subdivision regs, or we think the intent was that when the subdivision regs were written, a regular subdivision was like you drove in and then there'd be a bunch of houses and it'd be in the middle of a rural area or the forest or something like that. But it doesn't have to be that way, and so some subdivisions are being built off a public road and just has a driveway. And so if you're building on a field, then you could just have box after box after box of house without any buffer. We decided on 15 feet instead of 25 because they are a little bit different in nature and we didn't want to be too extreme. So, sometimes a subdivision could be just a split into 3 lots. And some subdivisions could be a split into 25 lots. So that's how we came up with 15. We decided not to go for the full 25, which are usually denser, more impactful subdivisions that require the 25.
Just a comment, with most of the residential units, we all have wells, we all have leach fields. So whenever you make land less, you're concentrating all of that as well.
Right. We did think about that. You need a half of an acre in order to build, have a well and a septic system. And for the types of subdivisions that we're talking about here that require the 15-foot buffer, those require about an acre. So there should be room. In addition, there's setbacks that are required. And the buffer, I think in all cases except maybe in the downtown areas, which unlikely to have this type of subdivision, the setbacks are already at least 15 feet or more. So you can't build in that area anyway. So we're just putting a buffer in an area that's not an area where you can place your structure anyway. But that's a very good point that you've made.
Thank you.
Any other questions about buffers? The whole idea here is just to try and follow the comprehensive plan and have things look pleasant and integrated. All right, the next changes are all the way back to around page 160. And this, Rolf, is what you were bringing up. 160.
It's not alphabetically, that's the reason I brought it up.
It should be,
It's on page 160,
yeah, page 160.
but if you look at it, it's not in place correctly
Well,
alphabetically.
there's 2 things. On 160 is land not suitable for development. So earlier we mentioned that
Oh, okay.
you would only be able to develop on a buildable lot area. In order to calculate your buildable lot area, and again, this is for subdivisions, remember, that you have to define what land you're not allowed to build on. So there's a definition called land not suitable for development. And these are things, if you look at the definition on page 160, these are things like streams, wetlands, brooks, vernal pools, stormwater drainage, Public and private rights of way, land designated as resource protection. These are all areas you would never want to be disturbed, bottom line. And in most cases, developers that come to us, even though this is not specified, they follow this. And so this just makes it very clear, so there's not a lot of judgment. And this basically mirrors what DEP does, or DEP allows and doesn't allow. Anybody on the board have comments about that? Interrupt me. So that's land not suitable for development. And to get net buildable land, you just take the total area and subtract the land not suitable for development. Okay? Go to the mic, please. And name, please. I know your name, but.
Timothy Crean. I've been a resident for about 40 years. I hide so nobody knows me. What sort of suitability for development? I guess it's a comment that I have, really. Reducing the acreage for suitable development to 1 acre is sort of leading ourselves to being one whole tiny town. That most of the houses in my neighborhood are hundreds of feet apart. And I think that reducing the required acreage for development is going to change that to something that we don't have now, and we don't want now, I think.
Okay, so I think you're referring to not, so the subdivision has always had a 1 acre lot size. You might be referring to the change, but we do have a proposed change in the land use code for things that are not subdivisions, to reduce the lot size in one district to 1 acre. And so I think your comment definitely applies to that. And we'll talk about it more. Unless, Mr. Cream, you're implying that subdivisions should have larger than 1 acre lot size?
Yes. Otherwise, the character of the town is going to change completely.
Yeah, I
At
do
least
agree.
where I live, most of the houses are, except for the ones in the last 10 years, are on at least 20 or 30 acres. And obviously, we're not going to be able to do that forever.
Right,
And still expand the town.
right. I think,
But to give up the option of separating houses by a little more room, by going to 1 acre, I think is a mistake.
okay, so we're not actually going to 1 acre in this? It's already been at 1 acre. But in the land use, in another section of the code, which doesn't apply to subdivisions, there is a proposal to go to 1 acre for the rural neighborhood. So kind of hold your thought a little bit for that.
Deb, but when we're talking about land not suitable for development and net buildable lot,
Right,
in a sense, by bringing this into play,
good point.
we are taking where, in the past, you could do, just with a cookie cutter, cut out acre lots and develop on the acre lot. And use that 40,000 square foot or 40,000 change as your buildable area. With this change, what it's doing is where you've got marginal buildable land, wetland, et cetera, that can't be used in that calculation anymore. So in a sense, what we're doing is for that acre, unless the acre is perfect, it's going to be bigger than an acre.
Right. So if somebody buys 2 acres of land, or no, let's say 10 acres of land, and the subdivision says they can have
10 lots.
one dwelling unit for every acre, but it has to be on buildable land. Now, if half of that land is wetland, then their calculation is 10 acres minus 5 acres, they have 5 acres of buildable land, they can build 5 homes, not 10 homes. That's the intent of putting net buildable land in the subdivision, is so that somebody that, might have a 40, 50, 60 acre tract, and they calculate they can have 50, 60 dwelling units on this tract, but they don't include, but they're including wetlands and all this other area, which would make everything denser. In this case, they have to subtract that unbuildable land and only work with the land that's buildable.
In your first example, some of the houses would have to be on floats.
I'm sorry?
I'm not sure I understand.
Well, if they were building on a marsh, the house would have to be on floats.
Oh, yeah, on floats. I thought you said close. Sorry.
Yeah.
Right. So what
But that
this
would be a
does is,
wetland.
in effect, what this change does is it makes it less dense than it currently is if there's things like wetlands and streams and that sort of stuff. So it's making it stricter, not looser.
And it's eliminating marginal lots. It eliminates marginal lots.
Oh, I thought you said mothers-in-law.
I'd have to be careful if I said that.
Okay, any other changes, any other questions on subdivision? Those are all the changes. All right, what I suggest to the board is that we go through the land use code, and then we vote on subdivision and land use code in terms of what's gonna happen next.
The placement of the definitions will all be alphabetized, correct?
Say
The
again?
placement of the definitions are all alphabetized.
They are.
Okay.
Okay. Next. Now I can grab the other one if I want to. But hopefully I don't have to.
Are you closing the public hearing for that?
Yeah, sorry. I'd accept a motion to close the public hearing for the subdivision. Moved by Mr. Harden, seconded by Mr. Mattson. Any discussion? All in favor? Okay. And when we're done with the next public hearing, then we'll vote on subdivision, whether to approve it or not, and then we'll determine what to do next with land use code. All right, the land use code, again, so these changes are to come into compliance with a new law. The law is generally known to a lot of people as LD 2003 and LD 1706, which is the bill that was passed by the state. But if you want to actually read the law, it's in Title 30-A of the Maine Revised Statutes, Sections 4364, 4364A, and 4364B. Okay? All right, so do folks want me to go over this one the way I went over subdivision? Okay.
Hey Deb, can you, for the people that are here that haven't been going through this law for the last year and a half, can you give a brief synopsis of what the intent is and what
Sure.
what the legislature is trying to do, so folks can understand why we're at this spot right now?
So, as I hope some of you know, there's a significant shorting housing across the United States, and that includes Maine. And that includes just about everywhere in Maine.
That's why I like here.
So, and I forget the exact number, but it's somewhere around
87,000.
87,000
According to a study by the Builders Association.
No, this is by a commission established by the state.
Not quite. It's a New York City consulting firm that did a study for the commission.
Okay, so, and the commission was composed of about 16 to 20 people, elected officials and housing officials, appointed officials, so
But the legislation was developed
the
to
legislation,
address a housing shortage.
based on that
in the
housing shortage and that commission report, the legislators proposed an affordable housing law and passed it. It has 3 sections. The first section is to allow affordable housing developments wherever dwelling units are allowed. So wherever residential dwelling units are allowed, affordable housing developments must be allowed. And the state further defines what those are. And that's actually been incorporated word for word into the ordinance. Okay? And when we get to that section, I can read it. But basically, there's a definition of affordable housing. If the affordable housing that's proposed is in a designated growth area of the town, and the town has 3 designated growth areas, I believe. And designated growth areas are defined in the comprehensive plan. Those are the inner quarter, downtown village neighborhood? No.
I have them written down too.
Yeah.
Yes.
That one.
One DP1 and DP2 is the other one, isn't it?
I thought so.
I think it's inner quarter, downtown business,
That's
and I
DP1.
think downtown village neighborhood.
Village neighborhood.
I think both DVB, yeah.
So the downtown, the village surrounding the town, and the inner quarter. Does everybody know where those are?
No.
No, okay. The inner quarter runs from
Should be a map on there.
about Hannaford's to Paris Farmers Union. The downtown business district 1 and 2 run from the Hannafords into town, through town, and then up by the monument, and also down towards what's called Lower Main Street. And the downtown village neighborhoods are the neighborhoods around the town. So parts of South High Street, parts of North High Street, Kennard Street, Nolte, Elm, those streets. If you look in the back of the land use code, you'll see the maps. Okay? Yep. So-
I find those maps very different.
Yeah, they're better on a
There
computer.
isn't enough definition
Yeah.
between areas. I used to take a cartography course, so
Oh, okay.
I
Sounds like we could use your help. The other,
think it's too late.
the other, and these affordable housing, and you'll see this in the text of the ordinance, there's certain requirements, okay? So if they're in a designated growth area, they can build at a higher density, 2.5 times what otherwise would be allowed. So if your density calculation tells you 10 units can be built, if they're in a designated growth area, up to 25 units could be built. So it has to be in a designated growth area. This is the state law. There are also other requirements, though. So those include performance guarantees, to be sure that it's built, to be sure that it's maintained, to be sure that it remains, a certain percentage remains affordable, that they have centrally managed sewer and water. So there's other requirements that go along with getting that bonus. Paul?
Just ask you a quick question. You said earlier the designated growth area was established by the comprehensive plan. So if when we implement a new comprehensive plan, presumably the town of Bridgton would be responsible if they wanted to change what constitutes the designated growth areas.
Yeah. It wouldn't, right now at least, the way the ordinance is written, you wouldn't have to change the ordinance because it just says, defines what a designated growth area is. But yes, that's the case.
And that's something that's important, I would think, for the people working on the comprehensive plan to be aware of.
Yep.
Absolutely, because when the original one was done, there was a completely different implication to the phrase designated growth area. Well, certainly somewhat different. This certainly changes the meaning of designated growth area when you talk about that number of units.
Well, in a sense, what it says is that in terms of density in a district in the town would like to have the density in those 4 districts.
Well, yeah.
Increase in the density.
Correct, but the town never envisioned it increasing to this extent. The town envisioned it in the original comprehensive plan as
You
increasing.
should probably go to the mic, Paul.
That's all I was going to say.
Okay. So I'll repeat what Mr. Turog said so people are watching at home. He said the original, his belief is that the original comprehensive plan didn't contemplate these kinds of density bonuses for affordable housing.
I don't think anybody comprehended.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody did.
The second part, another part of this is the dwelling unit allowance. So what this does is, and to be honest, this was already part of the code in a way. Well, not in a way, it is already part of the code. If you have, depending on the circumstances and whether you have enough lot area and frontage, you could build somewhere between 2 and 4 homes on one lot. Now, the average person builds 1 home on a lot. However, in this case, you could have more than 1 on a single lot. And whether it's 2 or 4 depends on whether or not there's an existing home, or it's an empty lot, or whether it's in a designated growth area. So you can get up to the 4 if it's an empty lot in a designated growth area. That's basically the dwelling unit allowance. Again, without us having stated it, this already exists in the land use code. Because the land use code has always defined density as lot area per dwelling unit. So, or the lot size that a dwelling unit uses. So you can already have more than 1, I believe. That's what our lawyer told us. The third thing is allowing accessory dwelling units. And this would be anywhere where a residence is allowed, a dwelling unit is allowed. With the exception of, I think, the shoreland zone, we'll go over that when we get to it, there are not lot area requirements. The intent of the state here was to allow people who may not have the best means to both either have a rental possibility, long-term rental possibility, or to be able to house their parents, to be able to house their kids. Bottom line. There are some, in Bridgton, this was already allowed if you had enough lot area. It just wasn't called an accessory dwelling unit, it was an in-law apartment or an accessory structure. So Bridgton has always allowed them, but has had requirements on lot area. The state has removed those requirements. So we can't prohibit somebody from having an accessory dwelling unit. Question? Did I say something wrong?
What happens in the future if somebody decides to sell their accessory dwelling unit and it's a separate thing? I mean, could all of these be sold separately now?
Splitting the lot.
Yeah, it could. This was, you bring up a real, what's your name, by the way? You're the only one we didn't.
Beth.
Okay, Beth.
That's a great question.
It's a great question. It's a question we contemplated and asked the state about. Yeah, if you can figure out a way to have that kind of ownership, yes, but it would, legally, the owner of the land would have to figure out how somebody owns the individual accessory dwelling unit on their land. Or whether they have a lot big enough to split and it becomes a small home, because really there's not a lot of difference between the tiny homes, which are allowed by the state, and the size of an accessory dwelling unit. So it can be, it's, well, I think there's a lot of different options that can occur, but the owner still has to go through the legal process of assuring that, if they're selling the accessory dwelling unit, are they selling their land, or just, is it like a condo where you don't buy the land but you own the house? So,
Is there a limit to the number of accessory dwelling units you can have on your property?
we've said one.
Okay, so if somebody sells their accessory dwelling unit, then that accessory dwelling unit can have one on their property too?
It's one accessory dwelling unit, it's one accessory dwelling unit per residence, not per lot. So, it just depends. So if somebody has a 4-acre lot, and they have a home and they have an accessory dwelling unit, and then they split that lot, then another home with another accessory dwelling unit could be built. That's no different really than what anybody could do today. Today, anybody could have a 4-acre lot, split it, build a house, and build an accessory structure. It's really not different. The difference is that the town does not have a choice to exclude accessory dwelling units. We never have in the past, but there are towns in Maine that have excluded the allowance of accessory dwelling units, at least in some districts. And that's, the state has basically said, no more. So keep in mind that everything we've adopted here is the basic requirement of what we have to adopt. With one exception.
There are also restrictions to, you have to meet requirements for your water and your septic and, all of those things that
Yeah.
you normally would require, so. If your lot is absolutely tiny
Right.
and you simply can't fit an ADU there, then you wouldn't.
Yeah, you still, the lot size, you can put it on any size lot, but you still have to follow the setbacks. You can't place an accessory dwelling unit in the setback. So, which are the same rules that apply now. So that's what that is. Okay, so 3 parts. So that's what's in here. So you ready for me to go page by page?
I do have a quick question. Carrie Castleman Ross, is there a maximum square footage requirement for the accessory dwelling unit?
We did come up with a definition, and the maximum was 50% of the size of the residence. is that right, guys?
I believe so, yeah.
I thought it was
So
40.
the minimum is set by the
said
state,
40?
and we can't increase that minimum. We can lower it, but we can't increase it. The minimum's 190 square feet. The maximum is 50% of the size of the dwelling unit.
Originally, we were
The reason we did that was so that we had some congruence and aesthetic between the main house and the accessory dwelling unit. And you didn't go down the street and see, a mushroom popping up here and a second large house right next to another large house. So that's what that is. And that's similar to what some other towns have adopted. Other towns have adopted a combination of square footage and percentage of the primary dwelling.
Okay, that makes sense. But otherwise, what we were talking about, Bridgeton's pretty much already in compliance with these new requirements.
Bridgeton was more in compliance than we probably realized.
Okay, great.
So, yes. I mean, we did put a limit on the number of accessory dwelling units, which we were allowed to do. Paul?
I even stood for this one. The size of the accessory dwelling unit, what if it's built as an accessory dwelling unit to a multi-family, an existing multi-family structure? So if I have a multi-family structure, can my accessory dwelling unit be up to 50% of the entire size of the multi-family?
Yes.
Yep.
Ready? Okay. Anytime the board wants to bust in and explain something, please call me. All right, so the first change is on.
Do you have something?
Just go up to the mic.
Go up to the mic and name.
Mary Turog. So if it's 50% of a multifamily home, which could be very big,
Right.
then can the accessory dwelling unit be a multifamily home too?
Mm-mm,
No.
Okay.
no.
But here's the question though, can a multifamily dwelling unit have 3 accessory dwelling units?
Not if it's one, well, let's look at what our definition is. Why don't we just do that first?
I think it refers to the structure.
It ref-
Bedroom upstairs.
That's an accessory dwelling unit.
Yes.
That's the classical, that's
Yeah,
the classic in-law apartment.
Let's go look at the definition, which is a combination of our accessory structure definition, the state's definition, and adding what the board thought might make sense. Well, accessory dwelling unit is on
That is page 159, I believe.
159.
Yep. Oh, that's affordable housing development.
Dwelling unit, comma, accessory.
159.
Yep, 159 in the written document.
If you're scrolling on your iPad, it says it's 165.
Oh, okay. Okay. I'll just read it, so everybody here at home. A self-contained dwelling unit that is an accessory structure located within, attached to, or detached from a single-family dwelling, two-family dwelling, or multifamily dwelling. That answers your question right there. It's a self-contained dwelling unit, which is one dwelling unit, that's an accessory structure to another structure, which can be single-family, double-family, or multifamily. So you don't have one for, if there's 5, if it's a triplex, you can't have 3 accessory dwelling units. You can have 1. Okay, an ADU must be a minimum of 190 square feet in footprint unless the Code Standards Board adopts a different minimum. I'm not going to read all of that. In which case that standard applies. And 2, it must be no more than 50% of the footprint of the single-family dwelling or of the largest dwelling unit within a two-family dwelling or multifamily dwelling. For lots with more than one principal structure, an ADU may be constructed for each single-family dwelling, two-family dwelling, or multifamily dwelling. So what that's saying is the ADU goes along with the main structure on the lot. So if you have two duplexes, two separate duplexes on a piece of land, you can have an ADU for each duplex. If you have one 5-apartment unit, that's one structure, you can have one ADU. So it goes by the number of structures, principal structures on the lot.
Just to clarify, because maybe I misunderstood, because that was my previous question. This says that my ADU associated with a multifamily can only be 50% of the largest dwelling unit within the
Right.
multifamily unit.
Right.
Okay, so that's,
That's different from what we had said before.
you're right.
Yeah,
Okay.
slightly different. I was assuming it was one building.
And it makes that ADU much smaller,
Yeah,
or potentially smaller.
potentially. Okay. That's ADUs. All right, now I'll go back to the beginning. I want to make a note, though.
See, I'm trying to understand how you were phrasing that. So if you have a multi-family, you're saying it can only be 50% of one of the dwellings in it?
The largest.
See, I don't think it's reading that way. I'm thinking it should.
Definition reads that way, I don't know if
The definition,
the
Yeah.
section that's,
I think our definition is reading that way, but I don't think the state one is.
I guess I didn't catch that when the attorney was putting that definition in.
Yeah, I think I think it should
Because the
go,
other thing we gotta be careful about is how people, when we say, some of us have said 190 square feet for an accessory dwelling, okay? So you're talking of a building that's 10 feet by 19 feet,
right,
is 190 square feet.
it's
right.
accessory dwelling unit though.
But this says square feet in footprint. Okay, so you gotta then decide, what is a footprint? Is the footprint, well, you're saying up, I'm saying a footprint is on the
No,
ground.
Yeah, and we
Footprint is-
discussed that at the
footprint is
board
on the
meeting.
ground.
We decided we didn't want it to be square footage of the entire building, we wanted it to be the footage of the footprint.
Right,
Otherwise, it would look, you could have, a skinny little ADU next to a big building that fulfilled that 190 square feet.
right, but if somebody wanted to come in and build a 10 by 19 little skinny thing, they can,
Yes,
is
Yeah,
what they're saying.
the law doesn't allow
Yeah.
us to do anything else. That's the required minimum. And same for homes. There was actually, as an aside, there was discussion at the legislature of going down to 100 square feet for a dwelling unit. So, like a hotel room, really. Okay? Yeah, so we might want to, I wrote that down, we might want to look at it being based on the structure, not on the largest, if it's a multifamily.
I agree.
Yeah, so I've got that in there.
are you saying based on the entire structure size, the footprint of the structure?
Yeah, because that's what the board intended. The board intended to have some sort of proportion between the primary building on the lot and the
What we didn't
secondary
want was,
building on
what
the
we
lot.
didn't want was to create a mushroom that was bigger than the original property.
And, yeah, and so, but what you might have is also, we just have to think about that. What you might end up with is something that's, if it's a multifamily dwelling, let's say the largest one in there is, let's say the building's 5,000, the
Biggest
footprint's
one is
5,000
2,000
square feet. And 50% is 2,500. But now if you're just going by the largest unit, that 50% would be
1250.
less. And
And that
Is
was
that-
our intent.
I think,
Well, I don't know, because again, we said we didn't want it to look like a mushroom.
And it's
So if you've got a
allowed
5,000 square foot building, and you put a building next to it that's 1,100, now you're creating that, as you
Mushroom
call it,
effect.
mushroom effect.
It's supposed to be an accessory dwelling unit, right?
Yeah, the idea is not to start from a giant one and work your way down to having multiple large buildings because you started with them.
Right, but I think when the state was talking about it, and different things, and we came up with the 50%, what we talked about was 50% of the structure, not of one dwelling unit inside the multifamily. That's not what we talked about.
The footprint
We
of the
talked,
structure.
correct.
Footprint.
So if you have a 5,000 square foot building, your accessory dwelling could be 2,500 square feet.
Right, up to 2,500.
Up
Yeah.
to it.
Right.
So I think,
Yeah.
I think that's probably something the board might want to consider changing.
Can I ask another question that actually relates to some other questions I have? Like you teed it up by saying we were trying to put together in conformity with the state. And now I'm hearing that these issues haven't been resolved by the state, or we're trying to create different measures that are broader than the state?
We're trying to create something that meets the minimum of the state, but tries to meet the comprehensive plan and tries to meet what we think is the intent of the comprehensive plan. So allowing the housing, but at the same time, not having it, for lack of a better word, detract from, the surrounding areas. So this is what the state says an accessory dwelling unit is. This is, which we don't have to adopt this definition, but this is what they have as a minimum. Accessory dwelling unit means a self-contained dwelling unit located within, attached, or detached from a single-family dwelling unit located on the same parcel of land. An accessory dwelling unit must be a minimum of 190 square feet, and municipalities may impose a maximum size.
So if we don't
Okay.
put the maximum in there at 50%,
Then it
they
could
could
be-
then go
then it
100%.
could be
They
whatever-
could
then it
take the
could be
same
whatever.
structure and build the same structure.
And we're trying to avoid that, because now, if we think that might intrude on the rights of an abutter, for instance. So if somebody can put, say, 4 homes on one lot, and then they can put, so they put 4 or 5,000, well, the footprint wouldn't be 5,000 square feet, but let's say the footprint is 1,500 square feet, which is pretty big. And then they add an ADU for each of those that's also the same size. Now, you just really created a subdivision.
Right, exactly.
So, and it's,
Without needing to go through subdivision.
well, actually,
Well, the intent
do,
really of the
but-
law is
but
to
not
create
because of the
livable,
4 houses.
affordable space.
yeah. So, there were other towns that have done similar, and we just felt that was, this is a living document, so these things can change going forward, obviously. But it doesn't seem like it's an accessory dwelling unit if it's the same size or 75% of the size of the primary dwelling unit.
Exactly.
So, okay? Kind of got accessory dwelling unit, but now we'll go back to the beginning, again. All right, so on page 1.
I got a question on page 1.
Oh, my God, okay.
In J, it says, to achieve applicable statewide or regional production goals established by the Department of Economic and Community Development. Is that, and again, this is another question about how the law reads versus what's in here. Is the DECD an actual law-making body that we need to follow what it is they say, or should or could that be to achieve legislative statewide or regional goals?
I can ask my honest, I'm not sure the answer to that question. DECD does have they have some level of regulating authority because they write the rules based on the law. So, but whether we should strike that portion, I don't know. So this is something that,
I think
this is something that the law actually has said, the purpose, and again, this is in the purpose, so it's not a standard, but the state has said that we all need to be in compliance with affirmatively furthering the purposes of the Federal Fair Housing Act, as it's defined by the state, and the state then passes it to DECD. So, the state passes a law, DECD writes the rules, they come to us. That's basically the way it works.
First, the U.S. passed the law, what you said.
Well, we have a Federal Fair
That really
Housing
makes
Act,
it
right?
intelligible.
So,
It ought to be easy reading.
so this is really just a statement of purpose. And our lawyer added this, I think, because because the state is asking that everybody affirmatively furthers the Fair Housing Act. Okay? Does that help at all? I mean, we can ask the lawyer whether,
I would just think for clarity that if we're trying to comply to state law, we should say achieve statewide and regional production goals established by state law, rather than name a particular department.
well, I think the reason the department is put in there is because the department gets delegated to by the state, but I'll double check. So the state codes a law, writes a law, and DECD then codes it into rules. And I think that's why it says that, because they're responsible for that, but we'll ask the attorney to be sure.
I think it's very similar to, if you look at B, one of the purposes is to implement the vision and goals of our comprehensive plan. DECD essentially writes the comprehensive plan for housing, so it's to implement those goals and visions.
It's a good way to say it. But we'll double check that. All right, next is page 9 on my copy, on the paper copy. This is a section which just basically says that what you have to have before a certificate of occupancy can be provided or issued. So you need to have adequate water, you need to have adequate wastewater, and then they define what adequate water and wastewater means. Any questions about that? This is actually something that's a little bit stricter than, in some ways, than what's written into our code now. It's kind of assumed that this happens, but this makes sure it happens. Page 17 is next. This explains the expansion of a non-conforming structure outside the shoreline zone, And so what it's saying is an accessory dwelling unit, and I mentioned this earlier, that if the lot is not in the shoreland zone, or the lot area is not in the shoreland zone, then you must allow, and it's a non-conforming lot, you must still allow an accessory dwelling unit on that non-conforming lot. In many cases, an accessory dwelling unit or a second structure would not be allowed on a non-conforming lot, because by definition, a non-conforming lot is too small, usually. This says if it's an accessory dwelling unit, you have to allow it unless it's in the shoreline zone. You guys pipe in if I say something wrong. Okay? Next one is on page 20, which is a footnote. Just referencing the state law. Next one is on page 30. In the use table, so the table of uses is what the code enforcement officer and the planning board use to determine whether a particular type of activity or use or structure is allowed on a parcel. And so what you can see here is because we now have a definition of accessory dwelling unit, which includes an attached in-law apartment or a detached in-law apartment. Those two are eliminated. The in-law apartment is eliminated, and accessory dwelling unit is added. And you can see that the accessory dwelling unit is permitted in the same districts as the in-law apartments were.
So it's no change.
So it's really no change.
It's a change, the dwelling detached in-law apartment.
Yeah, in the
is
definition,
different than a ADU.
no, in the definition of ADU, it can be detached or attached. So this covers both of those, attached and detached.
The apartment above a standalone garage.
Yep. So if you were to look at the definitions of dwelling unit attached and dwelling unit detached in-law apartment, you'd see they're very similar to accessory dwelling unit, except they don't have the size thing. So those became obsolete when accessory dwelling unit got added. That's basically it. Okay. The next one is page 37. So on page 37, what we've basically said is this is the lot area you need per dwelling unit. And that's per dwelling unit, not, okay, and if it's outside, if it's in both of these are outside the shoreland zone, if it's a residential use, or it's a non-residential use. And what you'll kind of see here is, with one exception, the board has not changed the minimum lot area required. So, as an example, in DVB 1, you can see in black what used to be the buildable area for a dwelling unit was 2,500 square feet. It's still 2,500 square feet. The only change, and I think we'll discuss this at the end, the only change is in the rural neighborhood, a proposal to change the minimum lot size or minimum lot size from 80,000 square feet to 40,000, although the board defined it to be an acre, which is 43,560. And Tori just couldn't make it fit without screwing up the whole table. So that's another thing we should determine, okay?
This is the time to talk about this.
Right, this is this gentleman's point, right? This is what you were,
Yeah, I guess
This is
I was
what
gonna
you're
wait to
alluding to.
talk about this, but we could talk about it now.
oh,
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
so, there is kind of like two changes here, though, right? Because one is shrinking that 80,000 to 40,000, but to Ralph's point, we never used to have net buildable area either, so
Right.
there is a slight distinction there that's at the same time coming in. But again, we're shrinking the lot sizes essentially to 40,000 square feet, even though now, compared to when the original code was written, the 80,000 square feet was contemplated as having really one unit on it, because there wasn't all this discussion about densities. So now we're cutting the size of those lots in half, and at the same time, those lots now can contain multiple structures.
They always could contain multiple structures. They always could contain multiple structures. That's something that folks didn't recognize about the code. They always could contain multiple structures.
Okay, but maybe you talk a little bit about why we find it desirable to cut the lot size in half?
So this has been a major board discussion. And the board has consensus on it, but, won't say it's unanimous. The rural neighborhood takes up 70% of the landmass of the town. And so in 70% of the town, you're saying, you gotta have 2 acres. And the board looked at that and said, that doesn't really further the ability for people to build homes if they have to have 2 acres to build a house. It's 70% of the town. And by the way, if somebody has 3 acres, they can split it in 3, come to this board with a subdivision, and make it an acre. So you have, you have a subdivision reg that's that's basically been that way for 20 years, that allows 1 acre lots if you have something that's splittable into 3. So, as an example, if you are a lot owner that has 3 acres, and you want to split that lot, and you're in the rural neighborhood, you can't. You are stuck on 3 acres. I'm using a harsh word maybe, but that's what you got. You got 3 acres. You can't even split it in half to 1.5 acres. Now, if you go to the town and you draw up a subdivision plan, and split it into 3, and come to the planning board, as long as you follow the subdivision standards, you can have 1 acre lots. And so there's subdivisions, so you kind of have an inequity here. That somebody who can come into town, I shouldn't say it that way, someone can come into town's the wrong terminology, I apologize for that. Someone, if they're willing to pay for the plans and to come before this board, can have 1 acre lots where in 70% of the town, just by following the subdivision regs. But others that can't do that, can't. So, our intent was to try and allow folks that don't have the means that developers have, or that people of, very good financial means have, to be able to be on the same playing field as those developers, and allow them to split their land. If they may just have 3 acres and they want to just split it in 2. Okay? They can't do that today. So that was part of it. The other thing is, this would be a separate question on the warrant, because it's not really required by the law. So this would be a separate question on the warrant and not part and not be part of the warrant question for the affordable housing. So,
Kevin Rade, you're addressing just what I was going to address here, which is this is not required as per the minimum we have to do to meet the standards the state's imposing on us. We know we have to pass this. To go to June 30th and not pass it means, as you said, the appeals may be under the control of the state, which is certainly something we don't want to see happen here. So if you're looking to ensure it's passed, I would question whether we should take another step. Not that we don't do it later, not that we don't do it at another time, but you raise the possibility that people will have visceral, is that the right word? Reactions to this. Oh, you're cutting our land in half, if you will. And you've heard several people mention it. Do we want to take that chance? Even though you're separating it, you know how difficult it is to get people to understand what's on the ballot. You're assuming an awfully intelligent.
I am. I'm assuming
Yep,
that
yep,
people that vote and that it's their responsibility to inform themselves and for them to understand and I understand what you're saying, Kevin, but for them to understand that they can vote down one warrant question and vote up the other, or they can vote them both down, they can vote them both up. We asked the attorney about this, would having more than one warrant question at the ATM, would it make people vote, if they didn't want the 2 acre to 1 acre, would it make them vote no on everything? And nobody knows the answer to that question. We've had 8 marijuana questions on the warrant, and then another, and the repeal of the affordable housing ordinance, and several other, like 13 warrant questions, and almost all of them passed. All marijuana ones passed, and
That was not an easy process, though, as you well know.
no, but, yeah, I mean, Tori, maybe you want to, now, there was in the commission report, no, it wasn't that commission report, it was a Cumberland County GP-COG report, correct? Where, where each municipality and the major municipality was looked at, and their zoning was looked at. And the only mark we got that was considered not in line with allowing, was considered harsh, was the 2 acre lot size.
In the intertown group last session, at least one town came in with the fact that they're going to go to the 2 acres, and their attorney had said to them that that was acceptable in his reading of the law as it was. So that's there. I know you all had discussions before about 80% of the town, or 70%, whatever it is rural neighborhood. So do you change the whole rural neighborhood, or do you have rural neighborhood 1 and rural neighborhood 2? Perhaps concentrically outside, spilling out from the center of the town, if you will, if I can say it that way.
Well,
so that there might be a 1 acre right around the town, and then 2 acres out by the mountain or something.
It was discussed, we did discuss that,
We did talk
actually.
about that.
Yep, you did.
And I guess what we decided was that would happen as an outgrowth of the comprehensive plan, and then the land use code would be changed again. And the comp plan is coming 2025?
It'll be the end of '24, so December '24, and then hopefully on the June warrant of '25.
So I guess the question is, do you want to wait 2 years to make that change? And then, of course, later on, when you split it, if you do split up the rural neighborhood, then the lots that are not 2 acres in those areas, they become non-conforming, and they can't be split.
Final point. at one point, wasn't the attorney suggesting that we minimize the changes that we make because we didn't know what was going to be in the law? And at the last intertown meeting we had, there were apparently a number of LRs, new term for me, legislative requests that are dealing with housing to change, to have changes to this, to the law. So the question comes back again, why would we necessarily go beyond what the state is asking us to do, especially when there could be more changes coming? That's number one. MMA suggested a minimum approach to this too, if I'm recalling correctly, not to go too far beyond what the
Right.
state was
Yeah,
requiring.
I would say we've gone pretty minimalist. There were a lot of other changes the board talked about that we just felt we couldn't address. This is the 2 acre to 1 acre is really the only,
And as he exits right, the
that's fine.
final thought is that the preponderance of input you get from citizens is they love the rural character of the town. That's the preponderance of the statements that I know. Some people might see as challenging that, which is not going to be well received, in my view.
it probably depends on where you're viewing from. Rolf, you had something to say.
Well, I was just gonna say that one of the other things that we were taking into consideration was that in the rural neighborhood for commercial, it's an acre.
Right. Oh,
All
thank
right.
you. And how does that,
And how
Doesn't
does
seem
that
right.
play? You know, there's no consistency here. So the thought about consistency was to go to the acre
thank you, I forgot
versus
that.
going to 2 acres for everything. Because the thought was if we went to 2 acres for everything, there would be some, again, back to your point, the resistance. And I would agree with you, by the way, that when you put something on a ballot that the public doesn't understand, the initial reaction of the public is to say no. And in this particular case, we've got 2 scenarios here, and it's something that the board, we should think about. We've got what is it, 2003, whatever. That we can't ignore. It's gonna have to be, and realistically, this board needs to do everything that it can to get the work that we've done approved by the voters. The second piece was what we're talking about here, which was, we had a lot of discussion about. If there's a concern about people not understanding what our goals are with it, which is what be the most important part, then we should be very careful whether or not we want to continue to do this today. That would be my thought.
Well, I think one thing we haven't talked about is educating folks. And there are a lot of ways to educate folks about what this is, because I think just saying the word affordable housing is,
But I'm talking
Could
about
ever
the change in the RN.
yeah,
You know, that's a very small thing, and I think, because I hear a lot about one of the real attractions of Bridgton is the rural neighborhood, the characters of the rural neighborhoods in the town. And we need to be, and that comes back to the comprehensive plan too, we need to be very careful about how we go forward with this and with the changes that we do.
right. But you brought up a very good point that I forgot, which is right now in the code, it's 80,000 square feet for residents and 40,000 square feet for a commercial entity. And it seems to me it should be the other way around if it's in the rural neighborhood. Wouldn't you want more space between you and a commercial entity? And yet, it's flipped the other way. So it puts the burden on the lot owner to get away from that commercial residence. But what if they build their house because of various considerations of the landscape? What if they build their house just beyond the setback of 25 feet, which is what it is on the side and back setbacks in a rural neighborhood? And then a commercial entity can come in and be within 50 feet of their home. It just, when we looked at it, we said it doesn't, it feels like there's an inequity there.
There is an inequity.
And it feels
for
like there's
sure.
an inequity between people who have the means to come to this board with architectural drawings and those that don't. If you can come to this board with, I don't know, I guess a subdivision site plan, which is a type of drawing, done by an engineer, then you can have 1 acre lots. And that's been the case for 20 years. So, you know, we were trying to address inequities, and we do realize that it's a sensitive issue, which is why we made it a separate warrant question, and, I mean, you bring up a good point. So, Tori, is there anything you want to add?
I agree about the inequity piece, and I think, you know, as a result of the comprehensive plan, we will see, you know, if having a district that is 70% of our land mass is something that makes sense, or something that folks want, or if it makes sense to divide it in a different way. Also, just want to point out that someone having a 2 acre lot as a minimum doesn't necessarily mean that that person will be a good steward of their land. So, you know, what's the difference between one person having a 2 acre lot who may or may not be a great steward of that land, or having someone come in and build a brand new home? So just something to think about.
Yeah, and I mean, there is an option, I guess, to do it in November if the board decides, you know, this isn't going to be the first public hearing, but that's where we're coming from, is trying to make a level playing field. And 70% of the town is a lot of the land mass of the town. It's most of the land mass of the town. Okay, all right. Onward. So now we're on page 40. Before we go too much further, we did do one exercise, which Ms. DiPietro did, for the 1 and 2 acre lots. And maybe, Kathy, you want to describe that to the group?
Yes. When I took different configurations of a 2 acre lot, like from a square lot to a rectangular lot, like, because they all have to have a certain amount of frontage. So we looked at minimum frontage, and when you square up the lot, of course, you get greater frontage. We ended up with, when you take into account all of your setbacks, the 75-foot setback on the front and then the 25-foot setbacks on the sides, you end up with a buildable area somewhere in that 35 to 40% of the lot, in order, when taking into account all those setbacks. Whether you're looking at a 2 acre lot or a 1 acre lot. But setting out configurations is really important in terms of how the lot shape works, in order to get the maximum buildable area in a lot. And none of this takes into account, like, if there's a wetland there or a stream running by or anything like that. This was just flat land, easy to build on. No, when setbacks were the only thing I was really looking at there. So I mean, there's already a lot of constraint upon where you can build in your lot in a rural neighborhood.
So it's, if you're thinking you're going to see 1 acre house, 1 acre house, 1 acre house, it's highly unlikely based on what Kathy did. I guess I'll bring it to the next public hearing. I basically took all 2,300 lots in the rural neighborhood and made a histogram of those lot sizes So, you automatically eliminate a large number of lots. And then I looked at those lots and how many were camps, how many were existing subdivisions, trying to get at what out of the 2,300, how many are actually impacted by going to 1 acre. And I think the number I came up with was around 250 of the 2,300 lots, which I think we're probably going to have another public hearing because we'll have at least one change here, which I'll try to bring to the next public hearing or publish prior to. So when you start actually looking at the details, you see something not quite as, shall I say, scary that from your initial reaction. So I'll bring that to the next hearing.
Yeah, I think those are the kinds of things we should have at the public hearings so that people can see it. Maybe we can make handouts with our lot sizes.
Right, and what we can do is probably have it available, prior to the meeting.
Yep.
It might be well if you could have some expert testimony.
You need to go to the mic and explain what you consider expert testimony?
All the way over there.
Yeah.
Maybe an example for another town.
Well, not to say that there's inexpert testimony here tonight, but consultants, somebody that might walk you through some of the ramifications of what these things mean and what they've meant in other towns. We can project and use examples here, but I'd really like somebody who's does this all the time, if you will, to tell us what they think will happen, what they think will be the impact. Am I dismissed, Deb?
No, I'm just listening,
Okay.
not saying yay nor consultants cost money, as you know.
Well, we have something they'll be in town if it doesn't work.
I'll leave that to Tori to think about.
Yeah, I mean, I know who you're referring to. Yes, we absolutely can take advantage of speaking with regional groups and looking at what other towns have done. The study that they did do, though, with the county was essentially looking at barriers to affordable housing. And so what Deb was referring to earlier with the minimum lot size, they gave us almost like a stoplight system of, okay, this is what you're doing really well for affordable housing. This is what could be improved, and then this is, what is a barrier in your town. And the thing that was a barrier for us was the 2-acre lot size.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the expert opinion looking at our entire region.
But conversely, that's why the new law wants us to
Right.
develop
Correct.
in the areas like the downtown.
Yeah.
That's the intent. They're
Yeah.
trying to make it work
And
in the community.
truly, that's also why we have designated growth areas too. That's something that towns have been doing for a long time, is to designate where we want to see growth and where we want to keep rural.
Right.
Remember, part of this problem generated from Portland, where everything is extremely dense. Their problem is a lack of land, if you will. That's not our problem out here. We're not dense and we don't have a lack of land that we need to necessarily address this town-wide. That would be,
Kevin, that's the problem with the law. I mean, the law,
Not Portland.
realistically, we have rural communities like ourselves and so many other in the state of Maine. And then we have a small number of cities, and we're trying to have one law that meets all.
well said, Rolf. Yes. Well said.
So we'll have more information available, including the consultant report and anything else you want to talk to them about. Does anybody else on the board have anything to say about this? Angie or Dan?
Think the horse is dead?
Huh?
Yeah. We have a lot to get through in the next 26 minutes.
Yeah, it might be more than 26
Yeah,
minutes.
well, my stop time is 7 tonight, 'cause I have another meeting at 7:30,
Okay.
so.
Well, we'll still have a quorum. We'll go as fast as we can. All right, page 40. I think I've already explained this. 2A and B. We already discussed this. This basically says minimum lot size doesn't apply to accessory dwelling units. And if it's a multifamily dwelling unit, you count the structure rather than each dwelling unit. Okay? The next one is page 107, which is just changing a reference to another section, so not one you have to worry about. It's just to make sure there's clarity, that we don't send somebody in to the wrong section. Page 108 and 109 is a new section in the site plan, additional procedures and review criteria for affordable housing developments. So this mirrors what the state has required, I think, word for word.
You know, Drummond, our legal counsel, gave us, gave us definitions and wording, and she was very adamant in some cases of what we had to use for wording. And then she would tell us that on other things that we could have some flexibility on the way that we wanted to say things for the town. I think that's important to realize that some things that we've got here are basically exactly what council told us to do. And some were developed by the board.
And this is basically lifted from the law, this section.
That's really what I'm trying to get at.
Right.
Is that,
So, we can try to answer questions that you have, but this is similar to what I said early on. First, they have to have certain application submission requirements, similar to lots of other commercial developments, but they have additional items. For instance, the enforceable long-term operations and maintenance plan, a performance guarantee, which is a fairly big deal. Rules about whether they can get the density bonus, rules about following dimensional standards, rules about water and wastewater requirements, parking. This isn't necessarily one the board agrees with, but the state requires, okay? 2 off-street parking spaces for every 3 dwelling units. That, we cannot make that more restrictive. Not for an affordable housing development. Remember, an affordable housing development has to meet the definition of affordable housing development. So,
And they've agreed at 80% of the median income, because for a while, affordable housing was 60% of median income and workforce affordable
Yeah,
housing.
you guys gotta go to the mic when you talk.
I said they agreed that 80% is 80% of the median income is affordable housing, because for a while, 60% of the median income was affordable housing, and 80% of the median income was workforce affordable housing. But now it's generically defined at the 80%.
80% and then 30% of your, I don't know if it's your gross salary or net salary income, but which I think is pretty standard, even for if it's not affordable housing. And affordable housing does not imply subsidized housing. It has to meet those requirements, and the developer has to prove that
and it's very specific.
it's very specific, right? Okay. And they have to comply with shoreline zoning, all right? We are now on page 112. This just clarifies that an affordable housing development, if it's all in one structure, it's subject to the site plan review, which is no different than what's required today. So multifamily dwelling units, if they're in one structure, go through site plan and not subdivision. And so that's just clarifying that same thing for affordable housing development. All right, next change is.
I ask one more question about the income, because it doesn't say median county income, it says local area, and there's no definition.
Yeah, there's a definition
Of
for
local
area
area?
median income in the back.
Okay, I looked under local area, and so it's on, what's it under?
Area median.
Median?
It's
It's
under
under median.
median area income in the back.
Definitions,
I can just speak to that a little bit. Through our CDBG program, we use area median income as well. And that's based off of HUD data through our census tract. So we have, a tract for the town, and then there are a couple of tracts within that. So it looks at the area median income through HUD's data. And that's kind of how we look at that for our purposes in CDBG. And we use the 80% as well.
Yeah, so area median income. Area median income, as that term is defined in the DECD Municipal Land Use and Zoning Ordinance Rule codified at 19100 CMR, Chapter 5, Section 1, which are the rules codified from the law. So if you want to know, so that points us to this document, which says area median income means the midpoint of a region's income distribution calculated on an annual basis by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development.
Yep. So it's using HUD data, Housing and Urban Development. And for Bridgton right now, 80% of area median income is about $52,000. So I think part of the intention of moving that up to 80% is to allow more folks to get into housing, because there is that, what people refer to as the missing middle sometimes, but it also incentivizes developers to be able to build these properties. It's the same intention as reducing the parking minimum. So if you have to have a third more land for a third more parking, that's cost prohibitive for the developer. If you can only rent to folks who are at 60%, that's cost prohibitive for the developer. So I think part of the intention here is trying to incentivize the affordable housing development and not prohibiting with those measures, if that makes sense.
Okay. So, let's see, we're now on, where were we last? 42, 152.
142.
We are now on 152, I believe. Yeah.
Definitions.
So that's just adding the acronym DECD, Department of Economic and Community Development. Nothing fancy there. Now we get into the definitions that have been added. On page 153 is the definition of affordable housing development. And it's basically the same term as is defined in the rule. And the reason we write it that way is so we don't end up rewriting the code every time the state changes the rule. So it will require the board and an applicant to have a copy of this 15 pages of rules for some of the definitions. So that's the 80% and 30%. The next definition is area median income, which we already talked about. The next definition is on page 156, a centrally managed water system.
Right.
Again, it's the same as what's defined in the law, and it's fairly strict. In fact, it's stricter than what we've allowed in the past in some cases. The big difference being it specifies the service connection, minimum service connections, and the minimum number of people and a minimum number of days that they're served. Okay. The next one is comparable sewer system on page 157. This was added because there were a lot of questions about a central public sewer system versus one comparable to that, which a developer might develop a 50-acre tract and put in a big central sewer and wastewater system, as is done already in many subdivisions. Okay. The next definition is designated growth area. And again, this is what the state has said. You can see that there. It refers to the comp plan. Bottom line. And that's where the three districts come from, the downtown village, business 1 and 2, which is kind of one district, inner quarter, and downtown village neighborhood. And our attorney, we use the guidance of our attorney to evaluate what those districts were in the comprehensive plan. So, I do have a question for the board, is whether you want to actually state those districts in here, which would require us, if it changes in the comprehensive plan, we'd have to change the document, but it also might avoid some circular arguments or, not arguments as in arguing, but debates concerning what counts as a growth area. So that might be a change we want to add to that.
Could also make them more obvious in the comp plan too.
Yeah.
So that people don't have to search for them.
Yeah, I'm just thinking more if somebody's going to argue this is in a growth area. And then,
Can I ask, what
yeah.
if there's a conflict between the municipality's comprehensive plan and the multi-municipality comprehensive plan?
Well, it says or, doesn't say and, so it's one or the other.
So if,
So we have a
which one
comprehensive
prevails?
plan.
We have a comprehensive plan
If,
and
yeah,
there's
so
a regional
to answer that more
comprehensive plan.
directly, if we have a comprehensive plan, that's what we use. If we don't have a comprehensive plan, but there's a regional comprehensive plan, that's what we use.
And
And if there's neither of those two, then certain restrictions still apply.
well, I'm just going to say, and in the definition part, council reviewed the definitions that the legislation said that we should utilize, and then a lot of them are exactly word for word that we should be using. So,
Okay, and then on page 150, also on page 158, you see we've deleted the definitions of in-law apartments, as we discussed earlier, because you have ADU. On page 159, you have the definition of ADU, which we already read and discussed. We added a definition of a lot to be sure people understood what a lot was. One thing we added, not required by the law, was to define what a parking space is. Given a lot of the discussions we have at board meetings with applicants about parking, that seemed like a judicious thing to do. And on page 170, we added the definition of a restrictive covenant. A restrictive covenant is required for anybody, any applicant that builds a affordable housing development. They have to have restrictive covenants that make sure that certain rules are followed. So that's defined as well. And those are all of the changes.
Do we have a definition for certificate of occupancy?
We don't, they were looking for one, but I have found one that was in the original DECD.
Did you?
Yeah, and
Okay.
I'll give you that, or I'll actually give it to you after the meeting.
Perfect.
So there is a they had problems, Tori and Brenda had problems finding one, but DECD did publish one and then decided it wasn't needed, but we can use that if we so please. We can add that on the next one. Okay? So unless somebody, does anybody on the Zoom have a question or a comment? Can you,
No, all set there.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sleeper. Greg? Anybody else in the audience? Last chance? Well, it's not your last chance because it's going to be another issue of this. I accept a motion to close the public hearing, moved by Mr. Harden, seconded by Mr. Mattson. Any discussion? All in favor, please raise your hand. 5-0. Okay, so now, next thing I want to do is go back to subdivision, and I accept a motion to amend the subdivision regulations as proposed, as written, moved by Ms. Cook, seconded by Mr. Harden. Any discussion? All in favor? 5-0. Those regulations become effective now. Okay, or as soon as, well, they're effective now.
Effective now.
So any new subdivision applications will follow that. If somebody has already submitted an application, they follow the old
They're on the old
rules.
rules.
Okay? Now just trying to summarize where
So
we
that
are.
includes the ones that are coming up on December. 'Cause
The
they've
ones
been
coming up on
submitted.
December use the old,
Use the
use
old,
well,
okay.
the existing.
Okay.
All right. So I guess my first question is, do we need another workshop, or can we, or were the things people suggested here clear enough for us just to give Tori some input and we can,
May I ask,
yeah,
we've got some folks in the audience here that should be able to give us some counsel. What you've heard tonight on the law changes, or the code changes, is it something the community is going to go for, or what do we need to do? Give us some counsel. I mean, I'm just saying it's,
I think if it's presented to the community as this is really required to bring us in compliance with state law, and it's the minimum that's required to bring into consensus with state law, then people will vote for it. As soon as, again, I think to Kevin's point and others' points, as soon as the issue becomes more expansive, well, we did this, but we weren't really required to, or we did this, then it becomes more of a mixed thing for people who really don't have really great knowledge of the particular thing. They just look and say, oh, something's happening that we don't need to do, so. That's my opinion.
yeah, so even if it's a separate question that has nothing to do with the affordable question.
personally am fine with the second question, because I think people can understand it, and I think people will just kind of say, oh yeah, these are technical changes, and they're broken into two pieces.
Right,
But it does raise the possibility, it does increase,
yeah.
again, my opinion, slightly, the chance that the one that clearly needs to pass could become murkier.
So we need to make sure we educate people. I think Ms. Ross had a question.
I'm just gonna say real quick, seconding what he said, and just add that all the questions that I had when I could reference it, preparing for it's very user-friendly and extremely thorough, so,
Okay.
great job.
Yeah, you all did a yeoman's job in getting this from 2 Junes ago till today. And you maintain your sanity, I believe, is that correct?
So far.
Don't be sure.
With whatever publicity, talking about the act you're going to do, don't do it on May 15th for a June 15th ballot. It takes time to get this across, in my view, and it takes time to build up a momentum that people are going to approve it. So
Yeah.
you can't just spring this on people. They have to be, tomorrow wouldn't be too soon to start talking about it.
Yeah. Thank you. That's a very good point.
thing, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Deb.
Yep. The things I had that were still outstanding questions, do we want 43,560 versus 40,000 in the table? Earlier, we said 43,560, that's an acre. For the 80,000 to 40,000. Anybody?
I say we go with the 40.
I was gonna say 43,560, because that way you can use the
Every
terminology
bit of it,
acre
yeah.
all
Yeah.
the time. It makes it easier for people to understand exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah, well, the board earlier had consensus on 43,560. And I'm sensing consensus with that right now.
Just a question. If we were to have another public hearing on this document,
We will.
I would assume we're looking at January, because I don't think anyone would come out to a mid-December meeting. It's around the holidays.
No, I think what we would try is to have it in mid-January.
Yep.
And I think that would be the time to do it.
I'm just wondering if it's worth another workshop during December.
Well, that was your question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can certainly do that. What I would do, if we're gonna do that, is just get together with you, Tori, offline, and just share the things I think we would need to decide at a workshop. And some of them, remember, we did talk about further changes to subdivision and making the lot sizes for subdivision and for land use match each other. And also, though, you could still go to smaller lots if you had an interior road. So we haven't fully integrated that, and we need the certificate of occupancy definition. The other thing is to clarify whether net buildable land is a change in the code or just in the subdivision. Right now, we have net buildable area, and it defines it in the code. Subdivision is different. So we just need to, that would be an additional change to the code if we did that. As a reminder, our code enforcement officer, I think, thought
I
it would
think
be
we need
good to
be
integrate that.
We need to be consistent
Right,
between both, because otherwise we create more confusion,
right.
and that doesn't help anybody.
Right, so what that would mean, what we're talking about is to make sure that the land use code section for the district requirements also includes net buildable land. And so that, you know, whether it's a single house or somebody splits a lot and puts house on each lot, that doesn't just apply to subdivisions. And, I mean, that's kind of common sense, so. At least we think it is.
Yeah, 'cause I'm kinda torn on that one. Because, let's say you have an acre lot, and 3/4 of that is not buildable, now you can't build on that quarter acre? I don't think that's right to say somebody that owns an acre lot that they can't build a house on it because you can't use the entire area.
But-
You know,
So you'd let them build in a wetland, or?
no, but you
Is
would have
the-
an area, say of that quarter of an acre,
That's buildable.
you could still build on that, but we're telling them, no, you can't because the net buildable area.
I see what you're saying, for a single home.
Yep.
Okay, so maybe that's a good point. So maybe that's just a wrinkle, I think, that you could
But
make
if the
sure you
lot
follow.
exists, if the
Yeah.
lot exists today,
Yeah,
all right, is the lot grandfathered?
No.
no, it's not,
We've changed the law that says today this lot's buildable. And there's been no change in the boundaries of the lot, and next week, it's not buildable.
But what happens when you own the lot, but then I buy it? I'm not
Well,
grandfathered as a
if you
new
buy
owner.
it,
Yeah.
but
I don't think it follows nonconformance, because it doesn't deal with lot size.
Right.
I
so-
think I
But I think
I
that,
understand what you're saying.
I do too.
Okay, I get it, but I also say that, I think one of the best things that we're doing with this code change is talking about lots and what can be built, what was needed to build something in a lot. Because what happens is that you end up having all these marginal properties which are built and they create problems in the long run. And I don't think we want that, you know? We have to maybe address how we take care of the one-offs that you're talking about.
And I think you could, because I think you could basically say that if you, for a single-family home, if you can still meet the septic
Can-
and wastewater requirements, then you
Well,
can do it.
Can you say lots established as of this date?
I don't know legally if we could, no.
Well, I've seen it done elsewhere.
This is something we could discuss at a workshop and probably send to our attorney, but I think there might be a straightforward way to do it without referring to dates, which then, you're going back to deeds and all this other stuff for this code enforcement officer, makes it
Well,
hard.
actually, when you talk about changing dimensional requirements or area requirements, I think that there have been cases where, within the code, there is the use of a date that says, before this date, the lot could be 30,000, I'm just gonna give an example.
Yeah, right.
30,000 square feet. As of this date, the lot now has to be 40,000 square feet.
Right,
And you could say, as of this date, you could say something with net buildable area and then change it as of this date.
yeah, I think you have to get to a dimensional standard. If you don't.
Well, that's what I'm
yeah.
getting at.
So, but let's discuss it, because I think the other way to handle it is to use similar language that's in subdivision, but just for a single-family home, which allows you to reduce the lot size if you have septic and water that fits in that lot. So, although the state's gonna say a half an acre, so it's something to discuss. All right, so we'll have a workshop in,
December 19th,
Yes.
can we do it on the 18th?
that's Monday, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I would participate I would be in a plane on December 19th, at some point during the day.
I'm good with the
I'm
19th.
good with the 19th, but I can't do the week before.
And you can't do the Monday, the 18th.
Can we do
I
the,
can do the 18th.
can we,
I'm
can we
free
do the
that-
18th?
Can you do the 18th, Dan?
Weather permitting, absolutely.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah,
if-
all
if-
your dates are
If we're
weather
gonna do the
permitting.
19th.
From now till April, my dates are weather permitting.
We're gonna have to do, if we wanted to do the 19th, it would have to be at 8 in the morning for me.
No, let's do the 18th
At 5.
at 5 o'clock.
Okay, so
And when
let's,
does the select board meet?
they meet on
Tuesdays.
Tuesdays.
Okay, so we're good.
Yeah,
that's-
we're fine on a Monday.
We're fine, so can we just take a quick vote on that? move to have a workshop on the 18th of December, moved by Ms. Cook, seconded by Mr. Mattson. Any further discussion? All in favor? 5-0. Okay. And as I promised, I'll get all this stuff down that we talked about and it's been brought up. I'll get that into some form for us to have a structured discussion. Okay. I want to thank everybody that attended, either remotely or in person. I want to thank you for your attendance and for your comments and attention. It's very much appreciated. So, and
Nice quick meeting.
move to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Moved by Ms. Cook, seconded by Mr.
I'm gonna go home and read that article.
Harden. No discussion, all in favor, 5-0. Okay, thank you, everybody.